Our next challenge is to handle what's called a JavaScript promise. And a promise, I wrote it here in the comments for us, is an object representing the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation. So we've been doing asynchronous operations. Remember that is calls that we have sent to content providers that after our page is loaded, we can send out a get request for some data that returns back to us. And our page is going to continue to interact with our user without getting locked up because it's an asynchronous call. And so our promise is helping us handle, it's another way to handle these asynchronous calls. But the difference is it is a return object to which you attach callbacks instead of passing callbacks into a function. So let me just demonstrate how that works. This is just sort of a contrived example. And this particular piece of code is a promise that someone else has written. And so normally you won't write a promise. You'll be using a promise, and we'll be using an Axios promise here in the upcoming video. But I just wanted to create this for you so you would see how it works. And the idea is that a promise, its job, if we create a new instance from a promise, its job is going to run the asynchronous data, and it's going to return one of two things. It's going to return the state of that request, and it's going to let you know if it was a successful request or if it was an unsuccessful request. And how we use a promise is we chain functions, which is what this was trying to get to up here. We chain functions in response to whether or not we received good data or bad data. Was it positive or was it negative or true or false or what have you? So this is the code that we would write that would utilize the promise. And the idea here in this code is we're going to call or access the promise. We're going to check to see if that promise returns something positive. In other words, that promise was resolved, and we're using the .then here. Then you see parentheses, and in the parentheses you see function fulfilled, and then something happened. And then what you're going to see is a .catch. And the idea with the .catch is if will I get an iPhone was rejected, then this piece of this particular chaining is going to run. This function is going to run. And so let me just walk you through the code so you have a better idea. Now, I don't expect you to be writing these things after this video. We'll use Axios in an upcoming video, which is why I'm trying to prepare you for. I just want you to see how a promise is working. So this might be a little bit more complicated, so don't try and understand the details. Just try to sit back and take a step back approach to what's happening. So I'm going to put my breakpoint on line 19 because this is the first thing that's actually going to run when this page, well, I'll put it on 16 just to show that fact. So I'm going to reload this page, and I am setting is mom false intentionally to force a reject in my promise. So let's just run through this and hopefully this will make sense. So mom is not happy. So the idea is that since mom is not happy, she's not going to buy us an iPhone or a phone or whatever it was. All right. So I'm going to step into this code. And when the browser hits this line 19, the promise is automatically going to be run, or evoked. And so what's happening then is, and again, you don't have to understand all the details, just understand that a promise is going to decide whether or not this is satisfied or not satisfied. So in our case, I sort of forced it by saying mom is not happy. So if mom is not happy, then we're going to throw an error, and that error message is going to be mom is not happy, and then this reject is going to be run. And that's all within the promise. I don't need to worry about all that. But what I do know is that once a promise has completed, and if I look at what is in my will get an iPhone now, you'll see promise state is rejected, and that I'm getting this error, mom is not happy. I've got a message, mom is not happy. So whatever is happening underneath the hood here, I don't really have to worry about it, and I don't want you to. What I want you to worry about is once a promise is returned, it's going to, in this case, it returned a reject. It said something didn't work. Mom, in this case, was not happy. Something was not positive, and so the promise sent us back a reject. And so what will happen subsequently is we're going to run our function. Our function is going to say, oh, that was a promise. So you can see that will I get an iPhone is a promise object. And since the reject state, you can see there that the reject state of my promise object was rejected. Therefore, not the dot, let me put a breakpoint here on the console log. I think I was, there we go. Since the promise returned a reject, my dot then isn't going to run. My dot catch is going to run instead. That's how these things work. And this is how we use a promise is we get the promise, we attach a dot then with a function if it's successful, and then a dot catch if it's not successful. In our case, it was not successful. So we should see that we go into the dot catch. We have an anonymous function that caught the error. So we have the ability to console log the error message, and we can see mom is not happy, and we can continue on throughout the, well, we don't need to really see that part. Okay, good. So let me go back into my code, and I'm going to change mom to true so that I can see that portion running instead. So undo this breakpoint. We'll stop here again, refresh, and this time we're sort of forcing that resolve. So now is mom is happy. We're going to, the browser is going to see, oh, I have to create a new promise. Let me check on the status of that promise. In this case, mom is happy. And so the promise in our case created this phone object, and it sent back a phone object. And so when we finish with this code, then we'll, oh, I guess maybe I didn't finish getting out of it. There we go. And so now we can see that the promise state is fulfilled. And then what was returned was an object in this case that has our phone and has our phone object. All right, so now when we run our code from our end of things, when we run ask mom, let's just see what happens. Let's walk through it. So we're going to run our ask mom function. We are calling a promise. That promise returned to us a state of fulfilled, and so as a result it's going to run the then portion, which is going to console log fulfilled, and it output our object. So anytime you have a promise, you're going to look at the documentation to see what is being returned from the fulfilled or from the error function. But this is, like I said, sort of a contrived scenario. But what I wanted you to get from this video is how a promise works. So if you call a function, if you call or create or utilize, I think is the better word, a promise, what you're doing is you are going to use the name of the promise. You're going to set up a dot then, which is going to have a function of some type for you to run if that promise returns a state of true or resolved. You also can attach a dot catch, which will which will be run if the promise returns a not resolved. And so we're going to see this in action coming up with our Axios, but I just kind of wanted you to see how a promise is working before you jumped into actually utilizing one.